Australia has resolved to speak up more on maritime disputes in a show of moral support for Southeast Asian nations, amid fears within the Morrison government that they might buckle to Chinese pressure and do deals that cede territory or rights. The Australian government last month filed a note verbal, a formal diplomatic note, with the United Nations rejecting the 9-line China relies on to lay claim to much of the South China Sea. Canberra maintained there was no legal basis for China to draw straight baselines between features to create internal waterways, and insisted there was no legal basis for China's artificial island building program to create exclusive economic zones or territorial seas. While the note verbal was interpreted as hardening of Australia's stance against China's claims, government sources said it was simply a matter of formally putting on the record the government's views. Claims in the South China Sea by concentrating in the region its most potent strike weapons, including long-range fighters and bombers, nuclear-armed submarines, and its first homegrown aircraft carrier. According to the Pentagon's latest assessment of Beijing's defense capability, China's Navy is the biggest in the world and has an edge over the U.S., with more ground-launched ballistic and cruise missiles capable of flying further. Heightened tensions between the two superpowers come as Australia, too, steps up its calls against Chinese expansionism in the region. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Stephen Biegun told an online forum this week that officials from the 7 countries had met weekly to share knowledge about the pandemic, saying it was a natural grouping of countries that really will do their very best to advance this combination of interests that we have in the Indo-Pacific. While Taiwan is seen as the most likely flashpoint for conflict between China and the U.S., the Pentagon's report emphasizes the risks in the South China Sea. The Southern Theater Command, which covers the South China Sea, has the biggest share of naval vessels, including all 4 of China's submarines carrying nuclear warheads. All 24 of its Russian-built Su-35 fighter jets have been deployed to southern China, while the command was the first to receive H-6J maritime strike bombers. China's first locally built aircraft carrier is based in the region. China is also developing air-launched ballistic missiles to allow it to complete the nuclear triad of being able to conduct land, sea and air strikes. Brunei has also been seen as vulnerable. It rarely speaks about its South China Sea claims but recently released a statement that called on disputes to be resolved bilaterally, reflecting China's stance, but under the framework of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which its fellow ASEAN nations want. China's belligerence and military buildup has led Australia and other countries to work closer together. Top U.S. officials this week flagged the prospect of expanding the quadrilateral security dialogue, made up of America, Australia, India, and Japan, to include New Zealand, South Korea, and Vietnam. However, the move was prompted by a flurry of notes from ASEAN members, 4 years after an international arbitration tribunal had ruled against China's claims in favor of the Philippines. In that period, the Philippines has done nothing to enforce its victory. But in December last year, first Malaysia and then China lodged notes asserting their claims, triggering replies from Vietnam and Indonesia as well. Show of support for ASEAN members. The Australian government's position is to not take sides on territorial disputes. However, another senior source said the government felt it was important to make a statement to show Southeast Asian leaders they have outside support for their rights. The source said Australia was also concerned that some ASEAN members would respond to Chinese pressure or inducements to abandon their claims and cut a deal with Beijing. China has recently used promises of an advanced stage COVID-19 vaccine to neutralize long-running maritime disputes with some Southeast Asian nations. The most likely candidate to break ranks is the Philippines' maverick President Rodrigo Duterte, who has made clear his appetite for Chinese investment, cutting across the pro-US stance of his foreign and defense ministers.